So I watched some videos online about taking off the manifold, exhaust manifold, on this 1997 Ford F350 with a 7.3 liter diesel. And I gotta say that I think a lot of these videos are happy path type videos, like, oh, you just have to take off this and take off this. Well, this is for the rest of the people who deal with the, the losing battle to rust. So some of the things that I did for this particular removal, I'll have some bolts over here for you. So this bolt, one bolt actually came right out. The rest of the bolts did not have any semblance of like a head attached to the bolt. It was so rusted, there was literally no visible evidence of the remainder of a bolt. So for those, I used an angle grinder to grind off the heads of the bolts. And some cases I tried to drill out the bolts. That you need a very, very long drill to get to this while the engine is still in place. I also tried welding a bolt onto the bolt in order to back it out. I also tried welding a stud onto the bolt and removing it with a stud extractor. In this example of the bolt was missing completely and welded onto the stud repeatedly until I got something that looked like a stud so I can grab onto it with the stud extractor. None of these things worked, except for this guy. This guy came out. None of these things worked. So what I ended up having to do is take an oxyacetylene torch and literally melting the metal out from around the exhaust manifold here. And that was literally the only way. Even after having melted all this off, like it's still, I was in there with a giant crowbar. Yeah, where is it? I was in there with this crowbar, which is, I don't know, 18 inches long, to pry this thing off the manifold. And you can see it wasn't this bad when I started, but just by working in here, this damage, this used to be a tiny slit, and all this damage just happened to it while I was working on it because it's just so, it's so rusted. So if you get in here with an oxyacetylene torch, there's actually a little bit of space to do so. And if you can heat up the cast, and the cast actually melts sooner than the bolts, the manifold bolts. So you can actually get this to kind of slough off and get you like a little bit of wiggle room in there. I also use this product, which I've never used before, Freol Deep Penetrating Oil, which someone recommended to me as a likely replacement for penetrating oil. I just recently bought some Aerocroil, but Aerocroil is very, very expensive. It's like $23 a can. This is like $8 a can. And I can't compare the two because I haven't used them both. But I will say that this stuff actually ended up working pretty good. I usually use PB Blaster, but I didn't use that too much on this job. So I guess that's it. So if you're looking at a job like this where you think that there's probably no way that you're ever going to get this manifold off, then you're in my category, and I wish you the best of luck. The one thing I will say about this stud extractor is I bought one of these from a local auto parts store, and I ended up breaking it the first time I used it. And I don't know if these are hardened or not, but I will say the first one I got, these inner jaws were not black, and black isn't a really good telltale, but it is one telltale that might give you an idea that this is like a hardened tooth. So I bought this one from a different store later on. They were the same price, and I don't know if these are hardened or not. It doesn't say, but I will say that you have to be very careful when applying one of these. Actually, I'll make a video about that guy, so that you don't break the jaws off. So just to show you inside here for a second, you can appreciate the level of rust inside on this vehicle. So here's the front wheel. The wheel is off. The wheel well inner has to come off. Lots of rust in here, and you got to work past the steering column here and get those bolts. So this is the new guy that's actually in now. You have to be really careful not to hit this pipe down here. And also, while I was working in here, I ended up breaking a brake line that comes down here that goes to the rear brakes. So you gotta be really careful for other stuff. And while you're in here, if you see lines that have like flaking rust on them, then you might be in for some repairs on your brake lines. There's actually several different states of before, you know, your brake lines to be repaired. I replaced this clutch line just now, and this is an example of a brake line. So this brake line, you know, it can have like little flaking, you know, a little bit of rust or, you know, on the surface. But when you see stuff like this where the paint's actually coming off, this is your first step. And then the next step is getting a perforation in your line, and then you lose your brakes. So yeah, that's it. Best of luck, guys. So in review, to get off these bolts, I tried several different methods, most of which failed, but I tried unbolting, which worked 12% of the time. I tried welding a bolt onto the stud, which I tried once and it failed. I tried welding a pin onto the stud. I tried drilling out the stud. I tried welding onto the end of the stud and taking it out with a stud extractor. And all of these things failed. What actually ended up working in the end was melting the manifold to a point where it was not holding on to the stud anymore and physically pulling the manifold off the stud.